Alright, we're keeping going with the factoring polynomials in the quadratic equation. Now we are going to do part 2 of this, so it's going to just come with some more examples. Alright, here we have a polynomial. It is not a trinomial because there's only 2 terms. But we can think of this as a trinomial if we write it like this. Here, x minus 25. So here, if we write it like this, 4x squared plus 0x minus 25, we see we have 3 terms, but really this one just becomes 0 and disappears because 0 times anything is 0. So we can still use our previous method for this of the quadratic equation. So once again, that's negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, oops, we'll just go with it, divided by 2a. And remember, and let's go ahead and substitute. Remember, b asks what's the coefficient of the x term. We see here that it's 0, so negative 0 plus minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4. The coefficient on x squared is 4 this time. The constant term is negative 25, all right? So not only are we dealing with a 0 for the middle term, we also have a coefficient besides 1 for the first time, minus 2 coefficient on for x squared is 4. All right, let's start simplifying things. Negative 0 is just 0, plus minus the square root of 0 squared is 0. Negative 4 times negative 25. Let's do negative 4 times negative 25. That's going to be positive 100, and 100 times 4 is 400. So plus 400 divided by 8. All right. 0 plus 400 is going to give us 400 divided by 8. And then the square root of 400, I believe, is 20. Okay, divided by 8. 0 plus 20 is going to be, so we have our plus and our minus. We have to split it up. Almost skipped a step, but I didn't. All right, 0 plus 20 is 20 divided by 8 is going to give us, that goes away, 2, and that is 5. So we got 5 over 2. And then over here, we're going to have negative 5 over 2. And it's at this point that I'm realizing there's actually one more step. It didn't matter before because the leading coefficient was just 1, but now that we have a 4, well, let's deal with this first. So we know that we have an x minus 5 over 2 because we flip the sign, and then we have an x plus 5 over 2 because we flip the sign, and then we just multiply whatever we have times the leading coefficient. So we multiply everything by 4, and there we have it. So we've actually factored this into 3 parts, but this is actually a special case. Because, is it though? It's special in the sense that we see that these two are opposite of each other. See, they have the same x and 5 over 2, but the signs are different. When we have that, these are called conjugates. Because when you multiply two things like this, what it'll do is the middle term cancels out because we have a negative 5 over 2x plus a 5 over 2x, and those cancel, which is why whenever we see a conjugate where they're the same values, just different signs, that's when we end up with only 2 terms. And then this 4 at the end, it just, if we were to FOIL this out, it would give us x squared minus 25 over 4. Then if we multiply everything by 4, that would give us 4x squared minus 25, which is what we started with. Now, this typically is not the format, but I like this as the format because once again, it just factors it even further. And factoring is a good thing. That's why we do it with it. Factoring, just like with prime factorization, it lets us see what this is really made of, and it shows us what our intercepts is. The standard format would give you something different, and it doesn't tell you as clearly what the intercepts are. So I want this to be the standard method moving forward. So I know that's a lot of information right there. The only difference between this and what we did in the previous lesson is we just multiplied what our results by the coefficient on x squared. But don't worry, we'll keep doing examples so it keeps becoming clear. So previously, we did the quadratic on what we had, and we just multiplied by the coefficient at the end. If you see that we have a coefficient, you can go ahead and divide it out, but just remember you have to undistribute it from both terms. And we did that in 2 lessons ago. You find what factors they have in common. So both of these are divisible by 9, so we could actually rewrite this as 9 times x squared minus 4y squared. And if you distributed through, that would give us 9x squared, and this would give us negative 36y squared. So we still want to factor. We want to factor this right here. And if you notice, we actually have an x squared and a y squared. So nothing changes, don't get confused. We're still thinking of it in terms of x squared, and our a, b, and c for the quadratic formula is still going to ask the same questions. So let's go ahead and rewrite it. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. B is the coefficient on x. There is no x term, which means it's 0. So negative 0 plus minus the square root of, there is no b coefficient, minus 4. The coefficient on the x squared is 1 because we've already distributed out. Right now, just to reiterate, we are just looking at this part because we've factored out the 9. The 9 will come back later, but and then the constant term, meaning the part without an x, is going to be this chunk right here. So negative 4y squared, and we'll just keep going like normal. That will resolve itself later on. Okay, 2, the coefficient on x is 1. All right, simplify everything. That's a 0 plus minus the square root of 0. Negative 4 times negative 4y squared is going to give us 16y squared over 2. Keep simplifying. 0 plus minus 16y squared over 2. You don't have to know why just yet, because I'm just now realizing I don't think I've taught y'all how to do square roots, so I will be making a video coming up on how to do that. But basically, well, I can still teach you how to do that. You take the square root of 16, which is 4, and you take the square root of y squared, which is y, over 2, and we got 2 situations. We got a plus, and we got a minus. All right, 0 plus 4y is 4y over 2 equals 2y, and then over here we have negative 4y divided by 2 equals negative 2y. All right, so that gives us our, remember we just flipped the sign, so x minus 2y, and then over here we have x plus 2y, and don't forget about our 9 that we factored out in the beginning. That will go right here. So once again, because we had only 2 terms, these became conjugates, which means they have the same values, just different signs. So we've successfully factored this into its 3 portions here. And the difference between these two, we factored out our leading coefficient in the beginning, and over here, we didn't factor out that 4, we just had to tack it on at the end. Or we worked with it and then tacked it on at the end. But yeah, if it's real easy to factor out, that makes it easier because then you don't have to do as many calculatings in here. But if not a problem, because as we saw, we can still work with it and just tack it on at the end. All right, let's do another. So let's just start with, let's make some observations. We got a leading coefficient of 2, but we also got a leading exponent of 3. So our whole quadratic equation formula thing we're doing only works when x squared is the leading. So let's see if we can factor anything out. So remember, we're going to factor something each term has in common. Well, they're all even, so we know we can factor out a 2, and they all have an x, so we can factor out an x. So if we take out a 2 and take out an x, we're left with x squared. If we take out a 2 and take out an x, we're left with x. And if we take out a 2 and an x, we're left with negative 6. Okay, so now that just means we are left with doing the quadratic equation on this portion right here. So let's go ahead and do that. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. What's the coefficient on the x term? It's just 1, so negative 1 plus minus square root of 1 squared minus 4. What's the coefficient on the x squared? It's just a 1. What's the coefficient on c? Negative 6 over 2. What's the coefficient on a? 1, because we factored it out already. So let's simplify. Negative 1 plus minus square root of 1. Negative 4 times negative 6 is going to be 24 over 2 times 1 is 2. Negative 1 plus minus 1 plus 24 is 25 over 2. Square root of 25 is going to be 5 over 2. Split it into two groups. Negative 1 plus 5 divided by 2 equals 4 divided by 2 equals 2. And then over here we got negative 1 minus 5 over 2 gives us negative 6 over 2, which gives us negative 3, which means we have x, flip the sign, minus 2, x, flip the sign, plus 3. And don't forget our coefficient at the beginning, or what we factored out at the beginning, 2x. So if we were to multiply all this together, it would give us this. And conversely, we can factor this into three factors, this, and this. This is actually way more useful than what they're teaching you in the book, which is how it's taught all over everywhere. But yeah, I'm just a fan of less tools. If you can learn how to use one equation, one tool successfully, it's better than a million little tools for the same job. So let's keep going with examples. All right, we have another one. Leading coefficient is 3. Can we factor anything out? Is there anything all three have in common? No. So we will go ahead and just do our quadratic on this. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared plus 4ac over 2a. And if you haven't figured it out already, we're always going to start by rewriting the quadratic equation. All right, substitute. B says, what's the coefficient on x? 11 plus minus the square root of 11 again squared. Ooh, that's a minus. And that's why we always rewrite, because we want to make sure we're doing it right. 4. Coefficient on x squared is 3. Coefficient, or the constant, is 6, so 6. Okay. Divided by coefficient on x squared is 3. All right, so we have negative 11 plus minus the square root of 11 squared is 121. Negative 4 times 3 times 6 is going to give us, negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times 6 is negative 72, I believe. Divided by 6. All right, keep going. We have negative 11 plus minus 121 minus 72 is 49. Okay, divided by 6. Negative 11 plus minus square root of 49 is 7 over 6. Split it into 2. Negative 11 plus 7 over 6. And negative 11 minus 7 over 6. We've got negative 4 over 6, which is negative 2 over 3. And up here we've got negative 18 over 6, which is negative 3. We've got x, flip the sign, plus 2 over 3. And then over here we have x, flip this, oh, they're both negative. Flip the sign, plus 3. And then don't forget, we got to add we have to include the coefficient from the beginning, so we put a 3 right there. That's all there is to it, and we'll do just a few more examples. Well, maybe several. Just want to make sure we got one of everything. All right, here we have one that includes other things besides the other variables besides x, but that's not a problem. Don't overthink it. Just keep using the formula like before. So once again, we rewrite negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All right, substitutions. What's the coefficient on the x? Well, you might say negative 3, but think of it as everything except the x. So it's actually going to be negative 3y, okay? So that's just something you got to be careful of when working with extra variables. So, because this whole formula is focused on the x terms, so we're really looking for things besides x. So negative 3y plus minus the square root of, substitute just the b, which is going to be negative 3y again squared on the outside, minus 4, coefficient on x is 1, coefficient, or the constant term is going to be 2y squared, okay, and then 2a, which is just 2, 1, all right, start simplifying. Negative negative is going to give us a positive 3y plus minus negative 3y squared. Remember, it's going to be negative 3y multiplied by itself twice, so that's going to be negative 3y times negative 3y, which is going to give us positive 9y squared. So we got 9y squared, and then down here we have negative 4 times 8 times 2y squared equals negative 8y squared over 2. Keep going, we got 3y plus minus, we got 9y squared minus 8y squared, which is just going to be 1y squared divided by 2. The square root of y squared is just going to be y over 2. And then we split it into two groups, 3y plus y over 2, and then 3y minus y over 2. 3y plus y is 4y over 2, which just gives us 2y. 3y minus y is 2y over 2, which is just y. Flip the signs, x minus 2y, and then x minus y, and then our coefficient was 1, so we can put that at the beginning, but it's just going to be the same thing. So there we go. We didn't have to change the way we did the factoring or the quadratic equation at all. The y's fit in perfectly, and so this is what this would factor into. All right, we're gonna just do a couple more here, and that should be enough. Remember, keep writing your questions down along the way, so I know how to best answer you later. All right, so here we have not a trinomial, we have a quadnomial, because there's 4 terms. And remember, our quadratic equation only works with trinomials, and it also only works when the leading exponent is 2. So this one's going to use a special trick, but don't worry too much about learning the trick, because it usually doesn't. A lot of these things, as you know, a lot of math problems in math books usually work with whole numbers, and they have nice clean solutions without decimals and things like that. In the real world, you don't encounter stuff like that. So this is just an example of, there's a little trick, but there's only a trick here because this math problem was engineered by the person who made the book. So don't worry too much about remembering this, because it's very unlikely that you'll encounter it again, but it is kind of neat to show you. So let's go ahead and just group these. Let's group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. So we have 8x cubed minus 20x squared plus 2x minus 5. So all we did was just group them a little bit. Now let's see if we can factor anything out of these 2 things in common. Well, they both have a 4 in common, and they both have x squared in common, so we can pull that out. So 4x squared, and what's left over is going to be 2x minus 5, all right? Plus, and can we factor anything out here? No, there's nothing in common, so we also have 2x minus 5. So this is pretty neat, because now, see, when we grouped them, we technically turned it into 2 terms because they're separated by a plus. So now we have 1 term here and 1 term here. Do these 2 terms have any factors in common? Yes, they do. They have this 2x plus 5 minus 5 in common, so we can actually pull that out to the front. What's left over when we here when we take out the 2x minus 5? We're left with just the 4x squared, and what's left with here? We're just left with 1, because if we divide out 2x minus 5, we're just left with 1. So looky here, we've just turned this 4-term thing into 2 binomials. Pretty neat. And we technically could stop there, but if we take a look at this, we see that we actually have a leading coefficient of squared. So we can perform the quadratic equation on this right here. So let's go ahead and do that. Negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac 2a. And I'm going to go ahead and just go a little faster through this, since you all should be comfortable with this by now. Well, maybe I won't go faster. I'll just do it without explaining it so much. 4. And we can go ahead and stop there because we actually want to be able to do the quadratic equation on this one. This is as low as it can go right now. And the reason is because this is positive here, because it's being a plus 1. When there's no middle term and it's a positive constant, you can't do anything about that. And I'm just now realizing. Don't worry about the explanation. If you just came up with 2 terms here, that's fine. It's fine. All right, one more example. All right, so we got a trinomial here. Observations, leading coefficient -10, leading exponent 3. Let's see if we can factor anything out. Yes, we can. They each have a 5 in common, so we can pull out a 5, and they each have an x in common, so 5x. So we're left with, oh, and actually, we can go ahead and pull out that negative sign too. Remember, pulling out a negative just flips all the signs here, so that'd be positive, negative, negative. So and the reason we want to pull out that negative is because it makes our leading coefficient positive. So we're left with x squared, divide by -5 gives us -7 right there. Take out an x leaves us with 1x. Divide by -5 leaves us with -4. Taking out an x just leaves us with the 4. All right, so here we've taken out the common term. We can do, and I did it wrong because there should be a 2 right here. All right, so now we can do the quadratic equation on this right here. So we've got negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Negative, what's the coefficient on the x term? -7 plus minus the square root of, don't forget the parentheses, -7 squared minus 4. Coefficient on the x squared is 2 this time. We got a -4 as our constant. Divided by 2, that's also another 2 right there. That gives us a +7 plus minus -7 times -7 is 49. -4 times -4 is 16. Times 2 is 32. So that's a +32 actually. 2 times 2 is 4. 7 plus minus the square root of 81. That's a nice number. All right. And then this becomes 7 plus minus 9 divided by 4. Two scenarios. We got the plus and the minus. 7 plus 9 is 16, divided by 4 is 4. 7 minus 9, well, let me not skip steps, huh? There's a 4. This becomes -2 over 4 equals -1 over 2. So that gives us an x minus 4, flip the sign. This gives us an x plus a half, because we flip the sign. Don't forget about the leading coefficient, which was 2. All right. And this time we also had this original common factor we pulled out, which was -5x. And then let's just go ahead and combine these two together since they multiply. So that would just be -10x times x minus 4 times x plus a half. All right, that's about all the scenarios. And see, we just did the same thing every time with the quadratic equation. If I were to teach you those 7 different methods they gave you, we would have had 7 different videos. So glad we could simplify just down to 2. If you have questions, write down the questions, ask me the questions, because really it's about procedure, and we want to make sure we're doing the procedure right. All right. Well, that's it for that vid. Bye.